"We didn't order for your son," my sister said, handing him a bread basket while her kids ate $120 steaks and dessert. My mom added, "You should have packed him something." I just smiled and said, "Noted." When the waiter came back, I stood up and announced, "But before I begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know." Now let's dive into today's story. The message arrived at 6:14 on a Tuesday evening, while Claire Whitmore was standing at her kitchen counter with a wooden spoon in one hand and a pot of rice going soft on the stove behind her. She wiped her fingers on a dish towel before she picked up the phone. That was a habit from years of raising a boy alone. A house ran better when nothing was left half done. The message was from her mother. "Dinner at the Hawthorne Lodge. 7 o'clock. Everyone is coming. Don't be late." Claire read it twice. She felt something small lift in her chest, and she was old enough to be annoyed with herself for feeling it. 38 years old. An operations manager who signed off on six-figure supply contracts without blinking. And still, one short message from Lorraine Whitmore could make her stand up a little straighter, like a girl called to the front of a classroom. The Hawthorne Lodge. Everyone in Cedar Ridge knew the place. It sat on the eastern shore of Bell Lake, 20 minutes outside town, a long, low building of dark timber and river stone with copper lanterns along the walk. People got engaged there. People celebrated 40th birthdays there and talked about it for a year afterward. Claire had eaten there exactly once for years ago. She remembered the bread, warm and crusted with salt. And she remembered the check because she always remembered the check. Nearly $300. For two people. She set the phone down, turned off the burner, and stood there for a second with her hand flat on the counter. Behind her, at the kitchen table, her son was drawing. Owen was 11, all elbows and knees and quiet concentration. He had a spiral notebook open, and he was working on a car, some low, wide, impossible thing with a hood that stretched half the page. His pencil moved in short strokes. His tongue pressed against the inside of his cheek. He hadn't looked up once since he sat down. Claire picked up the phone again and called her mother. Lorraine answered on the fourth ring, the way she always did. Never the first. Never the second. "Claire." "Hi, Mom." Claire leaned back against the counter. "I got your message." "Good." Something clinked in the background. "Ice in a glass." "So you're coming?" "Of course I'm coming. It's your anniversary." She paused. 35 years. That's real. Well, Lorraine's voice warmed by about half a degree. "Your father wanted something quiet. I told him that after 35 years, quiet is what you get at a funeral." Claire laughed. It came out easier than she expected. "Are you sure you want everyone there?" she asked. "The Hawthorne isn't cheap. If you'd rather do something at the house, I could cook. I could bring the ham you like." There was a small silence on the line. "Everyone's coming," Lorraine said. "It's already arranged." "Okay." "Valerie's bringing the children." "Okay." "And Claire?" Claire looked out the window over the sink. The light was going gold across the neighbor's fence. Somewhere down the block a dog was barking at nothing. "Yes. Don't make this complicated." Claire's thumb stopped moving on the edge of the counter. "What do you mean?" "You know what I mean." "I really don't." Her mother sighed. It was a sound Claire had known her whole life. It came out through the nose short, like steam let off a valve. It meant, "I'm being patient with you, and you should notice." "I mean, come, sit, smile, and enjoy yourself," Lorraine said. "That's all. Just come. Bring Owen." "I wasn't planning to make anything complicated." "Good," her mother said. 7 o'clock. The Hawthorne. "Don't be late. The parking fills up." "Mom." But the call had already ended. Claire held the phone a moment longer, then set it face down on the counter. She stood there and did what she always did after talking to her mother. She went back over the conversation and looked for the place where she'd gone wrong. There had to be one. There always was. That was how it worked. Somewhere in those 90 seconds she had said something that made Lorraine brace herself. And if Claire could just find it, she could avoid it next time. She couldn't find it. She'd offered to cook. That was it. That was the whole crime. Grandma's anniversary dinner? Owen said. Claire turned. He hadn't lifted his head. He was shading in a wheel well with the side of the pencil. Careful, patient. "Yeah," she said. "The big one? 35. That's the one. He looked up then. He had her eyes, gray-green, too serious for a face that young. Can I come? Something in the way he asked bothered her. Not the words, the tone. Like it was a real question, like there was a version of the answer where he stayed home. Of course you can come, she said. You're their grandson. Okay. He smiled, quick and bright, and went back to the car. Is it the place by the lake? With the boats? That's it. Cool. Claire turned back to the stove. She drained the rice. She got 2 plates down from the cabinet, then set the table, then sat across from her son while he ate and talked about a car company in Germany that had gone out of business in 1971 and how their last model had a rear window shaped like a wedge. She listened. She asked questions. She loved him so much it sat in her chest like a stone. And underneath all of it, a thought moved through her the way a fish moves under ice. Visible for a second, then gone. She had spent 38 years believing her parents loved her. She had never once in all that time felt sure of it. That night, after Owen was asleep, Claire stood in the hallway outside his door with her hand on the frame, listening to him breathe. She thought about the word love, how much weight people put on it, how it was supposed to explain everything and forgive everything. Love was easy to say. Fairness was harder. Fairness cost something. Fairness meant counting. And her mother, Claire was beginning to understand, had never once been willing to count. The dinner wasn't the beginning. Claire would think about that later, on nights when she couldn't sleep. People always wanted a single moment, one clean line where everything changed. But it was never one moment. It was 100 small ones, stacked so slowly that you never noticed the weight until you tried to stand up. She remembered Christmas 2 years ago. The living room in her parents' house. The tree Lorraine bought new every December. The smell of cinnamon from the plug-in on the wall. Valerie's 3 children tearing through wrapping paper on the carpet. Mason got a gaming console. Lily got a tablet with a pink case and a stylus. Grant, the youngest, got a remote control drone that hit the ceiling fan within 4 minutes. Owen got a sweater. It was a nice sweater. That was the strange part. Lorraine never bought anything ugly. It was navy blue with a gray stripe across the chest, and it was 2 sizes too large, and it still had the clearance sticker on the inside of the collar when Claire found it later in the bag. Owen had put it on right there in the living room, over his shirt. The sleeves came down past his knuckles. "Thank you, Grandma," he'd said. 9 years old, and already polite enough to break your heart. "You'll grow into it," Lorraine had said, not looking up from her phone. Claire had said nothing. She'd gotten up and gone into the kitchen and washed a pan that was already clean. Easter was the same shape. Baskets for Valerie's kids stuffed with chocolate, jelly beans, gift cards to the movie theater in Braddock. Owen got a plastic dinosaur that shot a foam disc across the room. Claire recognized the packaging. She'd walked past a bin of them at the discount store on Route 9, 3 for $5. He'd played with it all afternoon. That was the thing about Owen. He never counted. He didn't have the equipment for it yet. Thanksgiving, the year before. 14 people at a restaurant in Braddock, because Lorraine had decided cooking was too much this year. The bill came, and it sat in the middle of the table like a small, white animal nobody wanted to touch. Claire had reached for it. She always reached for it. Valerie has 3 children. Lorraine had said, mildly, as if she were commenting on the weather. She needs more help than you do. Claire had smiled and put her card down and said, "It's fine, Mom. $460. She remembered the number because she'd checked her account in the parking lot afterward. And there was the bracelet. That call had come on a Thursday afternoon, while Claire was in a warehouse in Denver going over inventory discrepancies with 2 men in safety vests. She stepped outside to take it. "Claire," her sister's voice, bright and quick. "Mom's birthday is coming." "I know. We're getting her that bracelet she keeps looking at. The one from the shop on Willow." "How much?" "About $800. Claire had stood in the loading bay with the sun on the back of her neck and done the math she always did. What was in checking? What was due on the 15th? What Owen needed for school? "Fine," she'd said. "I'll send you my share. You're the only one who can really afford it." She had carried that sentence around for 2 years like a coin in a pocket, turning it over, reading it different ways. At first she'd heard it as trust. "Look at you, Claire. Look how far you've come." The divorced one. The one who had to start over at 33 with a 4-year-old and a car that needed a transmission. Look at how solid you are now. Now she was starting to hear it the other way. You're the only one who can really afford it, Mitt. You're the only one who will not say no. She had never said no. Not once. Not in 15 years. And there was a reason for that. And Claire knew exactly what it was, even if she had never said it out loud to another living person. She was still waiting. Somewhere in the back of her, folded small and kept warm, was an 11-year-old girl standing in a kitchen with a report card in her hand, waiting for her mother to look up from the phone. Somewhere was a 19-year-old girl who paid her own tuition while Valerie's was covered, telling herself it was because she was the strong one. Somewhere was a 33-year-old woman signing divorce papers alone in a lawyer's office in Braddock because her mother had said, over the phone, in that patient steaming valve voice, "Well, Claire, marriages take work from both people." She was waiting for her mother to look at her and say 4 words. "I'm proud of you, Claire." That was it. That was the whole ledger. 15 years of dinners and bracelets and summer camps and airport pickups and hotel rooms. All of it a long, slow payment against 4 words that had never once been delivered. Her father had come close once. Harold Whitmore was not a man who made speeches. He had worked 31 years for the county road department, and he had the hands to prove it, thick and scarred across the knuckles. He said maybe 40 words at a family dinner, and 30 of them were about the drive. But 4 years ago, at a graduation party for one of Valerie's kids, Claire had gone out to the driveway to get a cooler from her trunk and found him standing there by himself, holding a paper plate he wasn't eating from. "That's a good boy you've got," he'd said. "Thanks, Dad." He'd looked at the house. The windows were lit. Inside, someone laughed. "You did that by yourself," he said. "I had help." "No." He'd shaken his head slowly. "You didn't." Then Valerie had come out to ask where the ice was, and the moment closed like a door in a draft, and Claire had spent the next 4 years wondering if she'd made it up. She didn't know then what her father had been doing every month for years in a bank on Front Street, with a deposit slip and a pen. She wouldn't know for 2 more weeks. The message came in at 4:40 on Friday, the day before the dinner. Claire was in her office when her phone lit up on the desk. Through the glass wall, she could see the warehouse floor, forklifts moving pallets of surgical gowns toward loading dock 3. She had been staring at a shipping delay for 40 minutes. Her shoulders ached. "Valerie, dinner is going to be amazing. Mom pre-ordered everyone's meals." Claire smiled at that. It was so exactly their mother. Lorraine did not trust a table full of adults to order for themselves. She had done the same at Claire's own wedding rehearsal, 11 years ago, deciding that everyone would have the salmon. She typed back, "What did Owen want?" She set the phone down and went back to the delay. 2 minutes passed. 4. 6. That was the first thing that was wrong. Valerie answered texts in seconds. Valerie answered texts while driving, which Claire had told her to stop doing 3 separate times. 8 minutes. Then, "Oh, we didn't order anything for him." Claire read it. She read it again. The forklift outside beeped as it reversed. Someone laughed on the floor. The building hummed the way it always hummed. She typed, "What do you mean?" The reply came fast this time, almost like it had been waiting. "The kids are having steak. Owen can get something when we arrive if he wants." Claire felt something drop through her, cold and quiet, like a stone going down a well. She waited to hear it land. She typed, "Why wasn't he included?" 3 dots. Then gone. Then 3 dots again. "Claire, don't start. We had a budget. Mom and Dad are paying for the grandchildren." Claire sat very still. The grandchildren. She counted them in her head, slowly, because for a second she genuinely thought she must be wrong. Mason, Lily, Grant, Owen. 4. 4 grandchildren, not 3. Owen had been born in a hospital 40 minutes from her mother's house. Lorraine had come the next morning with a stuffed rabbit and a card. There was a photograph on the wall in her parents' hallway. Owen at 4, on Harold's knee, both of them squinting into the sun. For grandchildren. Claire's thumbs hovered over the screen. She had 6 replies ready. 3 of them were cruel, and 2 of them were pleading, which was worse. She typed nothing. She put the phone face down on the desk and looked out at the warehouse floor and breathed until her heart slowed. She got home at 6:30. Owen was at the kitchen table with his notebook, exactly as he had been on Tuesday. "Mom." Claire realized she'd been standing in the doorway with her bag still on her shoulder. "Yeah." "What are you doing?" "Nothing." He put the pencil down. He looked at her, and Claire understood, not for the first time, that her son read her the way she read a spreadsheet. Fast, and for errors. "Is something wrong?" "No," she said. "Long day. Shipping stuff." He accepted it, or he pretended to. With Owen it was hard to tell, and that was its own small sorrow. She made pasta. They ate. He told her about a boy at school who claimed to have ridden in a car that went 200 miles an hour, and how Owen had quietly done the math and worked out it wasn't possible on that road. At 9, she tucked him in. At 9:15, she poured a glass of water and sat down at the kitchen table with her laptop. She opened the family payment app. She had never done this before. That was the truth of it. She had never sat down and added it up, because some part of her had always known that adding it up would change something, and she had not been ready to change anything. She started at the top and scrolled back. March, $210, Valerie, marked Lily Dance. February, $400, Lorraine, marked Hotel Denver. January, $160, Valerie, no note. December, $840, restaurant. November, $460, restaurant. She kept going. The screen glowed. The refrigerator clicked on and hummed. Outside, wind moved through the pine at the corner of the yard, and the branch that needed cutting scraped the gutter twice, the way it always did. Summer camp for Mason and Grant, 2 years running, because Valerie had called crying in April and said the deposit was due. $1,200 each time. The bracelet. $800. Her parents' 30th anniversary dinner, 5 years ago. $620. A rental van for a family trip to the dunes that Claire had not been able to attend because of work, but had paid for anyway, because Lorraine had said, well, someone has to. School shoes. A registration fee. A vet bill for Valerie's dog. A plumber. Claire opened a blank spreadsheet. She was an operations manager. She knew how to do this. She entered dates and amounts, and her hands were completely steady, and it took her 2 hours and 11 minutes. Then she hit the total. She looked at the number. She sat back in the chair and put her hand over her mouth. It was a number that meant a great deal to a woman who drove a 9-year-old sedan and had put off a root canal for 8 months. It was more than the balance on her mortgage. Claire sat in her dark kitchen with the laptop light on her face and thought about all the things that number could have been. A college fund that wasn't a joke. A second bedroom with a real desk instead of a folding one. A summer where she didn't have to explain to an 11-year-old why they weren't going anywhere. And she understood something that she had been circling for 15 years and had never once let herself land on. She had not been helping her family. She had been training them. Every time she reached for a check, she had taught them that the check would be reached for. Every time she said, "It's fine, Mom," she had taught them that it was fine. They had not stolen anything. She had handed it over, year after year, with a smile, and called it love, and waited to be thanked and been called dramatic when she wasn't. You get what you allow. She'd said that once in a vendor negotiation and been proud of herself for it. Claire closed the laptop. The kitchen went dark. She sat there for a while in the quiet, listening to the branch scrape the gutter, and when she finally spoke, her voice was low and flat and completely calm. Not anymore. The Hawthorne Lodge was beautiful that evening, and Claire hated that she noticed. They came down the access road at 10 minutes to 7, gravel popping under the tires, pine standing black on both sides. Then the trees opened, and there was the lake, flat and pewter-colored, holding the last of the light. The lodge sat above it on a low rise. Every window lit, copper lanterns burning along the walk, the reflection of the whole building laid out on the water like a second lodge upside down. Owen leaned forward against a seatbelt. "Whoa." "Yeah," Claire said. She parked at the far end of the lot, under a light that hadn't come on yet. She turned the engine off and sat for a second with her hands still on the wheel. She had thought about this all day. She had thought about calling her mother or her sister and saying the sentence out loud, "You forgot my son," and hearing what they would do with it. She had drafted the text 4 times in her head while doing inventory reconciliation, and she had decided, somewhere around 2 in the afternoon, not to send it, because she wanted to see it, not hear about it, Not be told there had been a misunderstanding, a budget, a mix-up with the reservation. She wanted to walk into that room and see the table with her own eyes and know, all the way down, what her family actually was. 15 years of giving people the benefit of the doubt. Tonight she was going to stop guessing. Mom. Owen was watching her. Sorry, bud. She smiled and got out. He dressed himself. They got her in the throat every time. A collared shirt, blue, buttoned to the top, and the good jeans, and his hair combed flat with water, so it was already starting to lift on one side. He'd wanted to look right for his grandparents. Inside, the lodge smelled like wood smoke and butter and rosemary. A fire burned in a stone hearth the size of a car. The floors were wide plank, softened by decades of feet. Somewhere behind the hostess stand a glass, touched a glass. The family had been given the long table by the water windows. Claire saw them before they saw her. Lorraine and Harold sat at the center, her mother in emerald green, a scarf pinned at the shoulder, holding the room the way she always did. Harold beside her in a jacket that no longer fit him well across the shoulders, turning his water glass in a slow quarter circle on the tablecloth. Valerie sat to their right, laughing at something, one hand on her husband Dean's arm. Her 3 children were grouped past her. Mason, 13 and getting tall. Lily, 10, in a dress with a stiff collar. Grant, 7, already up on his knees on the chair. 2 empty seats waited at the far end. There they are, Valerie called brightly. We were about to send a search party. We're 10 minutes early, Claire said. Are you? Feels like ages. Claire crossed the room with her hand between Owen's shoulder blades. She kissed her mother's cheek. Lorraine smelled of the same perfume she'd worn since 1998. Happy anniversary, Mom. You look tired, Lorraine said. Thanks. Harold stood. He always stood. He shook Owen's hand like Owen was a man, which was the single kindest thing anyone in that family did for her son, and Owen's whole face changed when he did it. Hey there, Harold said. Hi, Grandpa. Grown again. 1.5 inches. Owen said seriously. Mom marks it on the door. Harold nodded like this was important information, and Owen sat down glowing. Claire took the last chair. She unfolded her napkin, and then she looked at the table. For menus lay along the center, folded shut, each one with a small cream card tucked into the top edge. Pre-order cards. The Hawthorne did that for large parties. The kitchen printed a card with the guest's name and the chosen dish, so the service ran clean. Claire read them without moving her head. Mason, ribeye, medium. Lily, filet well. Grant, ribeye, medium well. Dean, ribeye, medium rare. 4 cards. Her son's name was not on any of them. The room did not change. The fire kept burning. Someone at another table laughed at something. But Claire felt the whole shape of the evening lock into place, precise and cold, like a bolt sliding home. So it was true. Not a mix-up. Not a budget. There was a card for Valerie's husband, a grown man, 39 years old, who owned a landscaping company, and there was no card for an 11-year-old boy who had combed his hair with water. Owen saw them too. Claire watched him do it. She watched his eyes move down the row of cards. She watched him find the names. She watched him count. He leaned toward her, and his voice was very small. Mom, it's okay, Claire said. It was not okay, but she needed 30 more seconds because she was not going to burn the whole thing down before she was certain, and because if she opened her mouth right then she was not sure what would come out. Valerie leaned across the table before Claire could say anything else. Owen, honey, you can just have bread for now. Owen looked at her. Bread? Don't look so worried. Valerie laughed, and it was a real laugh, warm and easy, the laugh of a woman who genuinely did not think she was doing anything. You can order something later if you're still hungry. Claire set her napkin down on the table. You didn't order him dinner. She said it flat. Not a question. Valerie shrugged with one shoulder. We didn't order for your son. Your son. The whole thing was in those 2 words, and Claire heard it land, and she saw that nobody else at the table heard anything at all. Lorraine picked it up without missing a beat. You should have packed him something. Claire turned to look at her mother. Packed him something. Well, Lorraine adjusted the scarf at her shoulder. You know how these places are. Mom, you knew we were coming. Of course I knew. You knew Owen was coming. Claire, you told me to bring him. Lorraine's mouth went thin. She glanced at the next table, checking who might be listening, and dropped her voice into the register she used for correcting people in public. Soft, reasonable, unanswerable. Claire, this is your father's and my anniversary. 35 years. Please do not turn it into an argument. Claire looked down the table. Harold was studying the tablecloth. His thumb moved on the base of his water glass. He had heard every word. Dean was checking his phone under the edge of the table. Mason had gone still, the way kids do when they can feel weather coming. Lily was arranging her silverware. Grant, 7 years old, was pushing a butter knife around like it was a car and had noticed nothing at all. And Owen was looking at the bread basket, not crying, not sulking, not pulling on Claire's sleeve. He was sitting up straight with his hands in his lap, looking at the basket in the middle of the table with an expression Claire had seen on him exactly twice before. Once at his father's last canceled visit, and once at a school assembly when his name was left off a list. It was the face of a boy doing math and not liking the answer. That was the thing that did it. Not Valerie's shrug. Not her mother's scarf. Not the 4 cream cards. It was her son deciding, quietly, on his own, that he could not ask for anything. Something in Claire went very calm. It was not the calm of letting go. It was the other kind, the kind she felt in a negotiation when the other side made a mistake and didn't know it yet. Her breathing slowed. Her hands stopped needing anything to do. Valerie was still talking, filling the silence the way she filled every silence. The kids have been so excited about this all week. Mason keeps asking how big the ribeye is. Honestly, Dean's more excited than the kids. It's a good steak, Dean said, not looking up. It should be, Claire said. It's $120. Valerie blinked. What? The ribeye. Claire slid the nearest menu toward herself with 2 fingers and opened it. She found the line. She turned the menu around and laid it flat in the middle of the table, facing her mother. 120. Each. Nobody spoke. The fire popped in the hearth. Lorraine did not look at the menu. I don't see what the price has to do with anything. Neither do I, Claire said. That's my point. The waiter came then, a young man, 25 maybe, with his sleeves rolled and a folder under his arm. He had good instincts. Claire could see him reading the table in the first 2 seconds and deciding to move quickly. Good evening, folks. Happy anniversary. Would everyone like to confirm their orders? Valerie was already nodding, glad of the interruption. Yes. So, 3 steaks for the kids, 2 children's desserts, and the chocolate cake for the table. The waiter wrote. Then he looked down the table, and his pen stopped. He looked at Owen, then at the 4 cards, then at Claire. And for the young man, he said. Valerie answered before Claire's mouth was open. He'll have bread. The waiter did not write that down. He stood there for a second with his pen above the pad, and Claire saw it happen. She saw a stranger in a rented vest understand in one breath what 4 adults at that table had spent all week arranging not to understand. His jaw tightened. He glanced at Owen, and then, carefully, at Claire. Ma'am, he said, we can absolutely put in an order for him. It's no trouble at all. And there it was, an exit, a door held open by a kind young man who did not want to watch a kid eat bread. Claire could take it. She could order Owen the ribeye herself, right now, and pay for it. And the evening would go on, and her mother would tell the story later as the night Claire got upset over nothing. That was how it had worked for 15 years. She absorbed it. She paid for it. She smoothed it over. And nothing ever changed, because nothing was ever allowed to cost anyone anything. Claire looked at the waiter and smiled. That's fine, she said. Bread's fine. Owen's head came up. He looked at her, confused. Claire put her hand on his knee under the table and pressed once firmly. Trust me. The waiter hesitated a half-second longer. Then he nodded and left. Lorraine's shoulders came down. She reached for her wine, visibly relieved. See, she said. No need for drama. Claire picked up her water glass. Noted, she said. The steaks came out on hot plates under silver domes, and the waiter lifted them all at once, and there was a small, ridiculous chorus of approval around the table. They were enormous, crusted dark, glistening, sitting in a shallow pool of butter with a sprig of something green laid across the top. The smell reached Claire immediately, char and fat and rosemary, and she watched her son's shoulders move as he breathed it in. Owen took a piece of bread from the basket. He tore it in half neatly, the way she taught him, and put one half on his side plate for later. Claire's food came. Chicken, because she had ordered without reading. She picked up her fork and put it down again and did not touch it for the rest of the night. She watched him instead. He was good about it. That was the thing that kept catching her under the ribs. How good he was about it. He asked her whether the lake froze all the way through in winter and whether people drove trucks on it. He told her about a car with headlights that flipped up. He drew on the paper napkin with a pen from her purse, a slow, careful sketch of a wagon with wood panels on the sides, and he narrated the wheels as he did them. Every few minutes his eyes moved. Mason cutting into the ribeye, pink center, steam coming off it. Lily pushing a whole potato around her plate and complaining that it was too buttery. Grant holding up a chocolate-dipped strawberry from the dessert plate and shouting, "Look, look, look at this one, it's the biggest one." Owen looked. Owen smiled at his cousin, genuinely, because he liked Grant. Then he went back to his napkin and his half-slice of bread. Claire kept her hands in her lap and let it happen. She had made a decision in the parking lot at 10 minutes to 7, and she was going to hold to it. And holding to it was the hardest thing she had ever done at a dinner table. Everything in her wanted to snatch the menu, order the biggest steak in the building, and slam it down in front of her son. But that would have been for her, not for him, because if she fixed it, the room would learn nothing. Her mother would go home and say, well, Claire handled it, the way Claire always handles it. And in 6 months, there would be another dinner and another set of cards and another boy with a bread basket. Some bills you pay, so they never come again. Around her, the anniversary went on. Lorraine told the story of the proposal, which Claire had heard perhaps 200 times. The snow, the borrowed car, the ring that had to be resized twice. She told it well. She always did. The next table overlistened. Harold said the parts he was supposed to say, on cue in the right places. And I said, well, I'm not asking twice, he said, and everyone laughed and he didn't. Claire watched her father through the whole meal. He ate maybe a third of what was in front of him. He answered when spoken to. Twice, he looked down the table at Owen, quick glances, up and away, like a man checking a wound he couldn't treat. Once their eyes met. Claire held it. Harold looked back at his plate. 65 years old. 31 years on county road crews. A man who could reroute traffic around a sinkhole in the dark and rain with 3 flares and a radio. And he could not say 4 words to his wife across the table. Claire had spent her whole life loving him for his gentleness. That night she saw the price of it. Gentleness that never acts isn't gentleness. It's just permission, handed out quietly, over and over for 35 years. Valerie was in her element. She talked about the kids' school, about a woman on the PDA who had no business being on the PDA, about the trip they were considering for spring. She reached over twice to cut Grant's steak. And at one point, she leaned down the table toward Claire with her chin propped on her hand. You're quiet tonight. Am I? You okay? There was nothing behind it. That was the strangest part. Valerie asked it the way you'd ask about traffic. I'm fine, Claire said. You should try the chicken. Everyone says the chicken's good here. I'm sure. The plates were cleared. The dessert came out. The chocolate cake, for candles because they didn't have 35, Lorraine laughing and waving her hand and letting everyone sing. The staff clapped. The next table clapped. Claire clapped too. Owen ate his second half slice of bread. Then the waiter came back, and the room got very simple. Can I get anyone anything else this evening? More coffee? Claire spoke before anyone else could. Yes. Every head at the table turned. That was how rarely she started sentences at family dinners. I'd like the check, Claire said. Lorraine's face relaxed into something almost sweet. Of course, she said. Valerie laughed. Claire always handles these things. Claire looked at her sister. Not tonight. The laugh stopped in Valerie's throat like a hiccup. What? The waiter came back with the folder. He set it down at Claire's elbow, because of course he did. Everyone in that restaurant had spent 2 hours learning who paid at this table. Claire opened it. She read the total slowly, line by line, in the way she read a vendor invoice, which was a habit she had never once been able to break. 4 ribeyes, a fillet, 2 bottles of wine, appetizers she hadn't seen ordered, desserts, coffee, $1,142.60. She took her card out of her wallet. She set it on the white tablecloth, face up, and left her fingers on it. "Thank you, sweetheart," Lorraine said. Claire slid the card back and put it in her wallet. "No." Lorraine frowned. "What?" "I said no." Valerie's voice went up half a step. "You're serious?" Claire reached into her purse and counted out cash. She had gone to the bank at lunch, which was the only part of the evening she had planned in advance, and laid it on the folder in a neat stack. "That covers my chicken and Owen's bread," she said. "Plus tip, 25%, because our server was the only person at this table with any decency tonight." Nobody moved. "Everything else," Claire said, "is yours." Lorraine's voice came out sharp and low. "Claire, this is our anniversary." "I know. You are embarrassing us." Claire looked around the table then, really looked, at her sister's open mouth, at Dean, who had finally put the phone down, at her father, whose eyes were closed, at Mason, 13, watching his aunt with an expression Claire would think about for a long time afterward. "I'm not the one who left a child off the order," she said. The silence that followed was not the loud kind. It was thin and total, the kind where you can suddenly hear the ice settle in the glasses and a fork touch a plate 3 tables away. Lorraine's face had gone white around the mouth. "After everything we have done for you," she said. Claire stood up. She put her purse on her shoulder. She picked up Owen's napkin drawing, folded it once, and put it in her coat pocket. Then she put her hand out to her son. "Come on." Owen slid off his chair. He looked around the table at all of them, his grandmother, his grandfather, his aunt, his cousins, and he did the thing that broke her worst of all. "Thank you for dinner," he said. And then he took her hand. The air outside hit them like cold water. It had dropped 10 degrees since 7. Claire's breath showed. Down the slope, the lake had gone completely black, and the lights of the lodge lay out on it in long, broken lines, shifting with the water. From the deck came the smell of the fire pit, and laughter from people who were having a perfectly good night. Owen walked beside her without saying anything. He didn't speak until they reached the car, and she'd unlocked it, and neither of them had opened a door yet. "Mom!" "Yeah." He had his hands pushed into his pockets. His breath came out white. "Did I do something?" Claire stopped with her hand on the door handle. For 1 second, she wasn't sure her legs were going to keep working. Then they did, because they always did, because that was the arrangement she had made with herself when he was 4 years old and she was sleeping on a mattress in a rented duplex in Braddock. She came around the car and crouched down in the gravel in front of him so that her eyes were below his. "No," she said. "You did nothing. Not one thing." "Then why didn't Grandma want me to have steak?" The question was so direct that it took the ground out from under every soft answer she had ready. Claire looked at him, at the collar he'd buttoned himself, at the hair that had dried and lifted on one side, at the way he was working hard, right now, to keep his chin steady. She could lie. Parents lied about this all the time. It was practically a category. Grandma's just stressed. There was a mix-up. She loves you. She just shows it differently. That last one was the worst lie of all. Claire had been fed it her whole life, and it had cost her 15 years. "Because sometimes adults make unfair choices," she said. "And then they tell themselves a story, so they can keep making them." Owen thought about that. He always thought before he answered. It was one of the ways he was hers. "Is it because of me? Because I don't have a dad who comes?" "No." "Because there's 3 of them, and 1 of me?" "No, baby." He looked down at his shoes. "Are we not part of the family?" Claire felt something tear. It was not a metaphor. There was a physical sensation under her sternum, sharp and hot, and it was 15 years of swallowed dinners coming loose all at once. She pulled him in. He came stiffly at first, then all at once, and his arms went around her neck, and she felt his face go hot and wet against her shoulder, and he did not make any sound at all because he was 11 and there were people in the parking lot. "You are my family," she said into his hair. He was quiet, then muffled. "Just you?" Claire held him tighter. "I'm enough." Behind them, the lodge door opened. Light fell across the gravel and then narrowed as the door swung back. "Claire!" Claire stood slowly. She kept one hand on Owen's shoulder and turned around. Valerie came down the walk fast, arms crossed against the cold. No coat, her shoes wrong for gravel. Are you kidding me right now? Get in the car, bud, Claire said quietly. Owen went. The door shut. Valerie stopped 6 feet away. Her breath came out in bursts. You're really going to leave? You're really doing this? Yes. Over a steak. Claire looked at her sister. 41 years old. The same face she'd shared a bathroom with for 18 years. No, Claire said. Then what? Because from where I'm sitting, my son sat at a table for 2 hours, Claire said, and watched 4 other people eat, and worked out on his own that his family thinks he's worth less. He's 11. He did that math himself. Nobody had to teach him. Valerie's arms tightened. That is so dramatic. Yes, Claire said. That's the word. What's that supposed to mean? It's what you call it every single time I finally react to something. Not when it happens. When I react. Claire's voice stayed level. She was not shouting. She had never in her life been less interested in shouting. You've been using it since we were teenagers. Mom taught it to you. It's a very efficient word. It means the thing that was done doesn't matter, only the noise about it. Valerie shook her head, fast. You know what your problem is? You keep score. Mom says you make everything into a transaction. Claire almost laughed. Val. She said it gently, and that seemed to unsettle her sister more than anger would have. There's $1,142 sitting on a table in there. Somebody in that room is about to find out what a transaction is. Valerie's face changed then, not to shame, to calculation. Claire watched it move behind her eyes. The wine, the appetizers, the 4 ribeyes, Dean's card, their mother's face. Mom is going to be furious, Valerie said. Claire opened the car door. The dome light came on. Inside, Owen sat with his seatbelt already on, looking straight ahead through the windshield at the dark water. Claire looked back at her sister one last time. I think she's been furious with me for years, she said. I just kept paying her not to show it. She got in. She started the engine. And she drove away down the gravel road with the lodge shrinking in the mirror, and her son quiet beside her, and her hands perfectly steady on the wheel. Halfway home, Owen spoke. Mom. Yeah. The bread was actually really good. Claire laughed. It came out cracked and wet and surprised, and she reached over and put her hand on the back of his head. Next time, she said, you're getting the steak. The phone started at 8:40 the next morning. Claire was at the kitchen table with coffee and the laptop open, the spreadsheet still on the screen from the night before last. Through the window, she could see Owen in the backyard, throwing a tennis ball against the fence and catching it on the bounce. He'd been out there since 8. He did that when he was thinking. MOM. Claire let it ring out. 2 minutes later it rang again. She watched it move on the table. The third time, she picked up. What? There was a pause on the other end. Lorraine had expected the usual voice. The one that said, Hi, Mom. Sorry. I was in the shower. That's how you answer the phone now. You called 3 times in 6 minutes. I assumed it was urgent. You owe your father and me an apology. Claire turned her coffee cup a quarter turn on the table. Outside, the tennis ball hit the fence. Thump. Catch. For what? For ruining our anniversary. I didn't ruin anything. You walked out of a restaurant in front of the whole room. After my son was excluded in front of the whole room. You could have handled it privately. Lorraine's voice was doing the thing it did, climbing and softening at the same time, like a hand on the back of your neck. You could have called me the next day. We could have talked it through, the two of us, and none of this would have happened. Claire laughed once short, with no humor in it at all. Mom, you excluded him publicly. You had a card printed with Dean's name on it. Dean, your son-in-law who forgot your birthday 2 years running. That's unfair. Which part? Silence. Then a rustle, a chair. The sound of her mother sitting down. Do you know how it looked? Lorraine said. Do you know what that room thought of us? Diane Pruitt was 3 tables over. She saw the whole thing. There it is, Claire said quietly. What? That's your first question. Not is Owen all right? Not did I hurt him? How did it look? Don't put words in my mouth. I didn't have to. Her mother breathed out through her nose. Steam off a valve. You've changed, Lorraine said. Claire watched her son through the glass. Thump. Catch. Thump. Catch. He had a rhythm going now, and his mouth was moving, and she knew he was doing commentary for an imaginary crowd. "No," she said. "Excuse me? I haven't changed. I just stopped pretending." "Pretending about what, Claire? Honestly, everything is a wound with you. Everything is a case you're building." "All right." Claire pulled the laptop toward her and turned it so the screen faced her fully, though her mother couldn't see it. "Then let's talk about the case." "Oh, here we go. I paid for your anniversary dinner 5 years ago. $620 at the place in Braddock with the piano." "Nothing. I paid for the hotel rooms when you and Dad went to Denver for the reunion. $400 in February." "Nothing. I paid Mason's summer camp deposit 2 years running because Valerie called me crying about it. $1,200 each time. $2,400, Mom. Neither of them has ever mentioned it again." "Claire, I paid for the bracelet. All of it, not a share. Valerie told me she'd cover half, and she never did. And I never asked, because asking would have made me the difficult one." Her mother's voice, when it came, had lost some of its shape. "That's what family does." Claire closed the laptop. The click was loud in the kitchen. "No, Mom," she said. "That's what people do when they care." "Are you saying we don't care about you?" "I'm saying I've been the only one paying, and I finally sat down and added it up, and the number was bigger than my mortgage. 15 years. And in 15 years, do you know what I've never once heard from you? Claire, don't. That you're proud of me." The words came out steady. That surprised her most of all. She had imagined saying them 100 times, and in every version her voice broke. The line was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know what you want me to say," Lorraine said finally. And Claire understood, in that second, with total clarity, that her mother was telling the truth. She did not know. There was no version of Lorraine Whitmore in which those words existed and had simply been withheld. They had never been in the building. 15 years of paying rent on an apartment that was never going to be built. "Nothing," Claire said. "You don't have to say anything. So we just what? We don't speak. We can speak. When you're ready to speak to me the way you speak to Valerie. That is not, goodbye, Mom." Claire ended the call. She sat there with her hands still on the phone and waited for the guilt to arrive, because it always arrived, on a delay of about 90 seconds, like thunder after lightning. She waited 2 minutes. It didn't come. Outside, the tennis ball hit the fence, and her son hooped, and Claire got up and went out into the cold morning to catch the next one. The envelope came 3 days later. It was in the mail between a utility bill and a flyer for a roofing company. Heavy cream paper, her name and address typed, and in the corner, Prescott and Hale, attorneys at law, with an address on Front Street in Braddock. Claire stood in her driveway in her work clothes and turned it over twice. Her first thought was that her mother had done something. That was where 15 years of training took her. That a letter from a lawyer meant she was in trouble. She opened it standing up, right there by the mailbox with the wind pulling at the pages. It was about an account. She knew the account. That was the strange part. She'd known about it since she was in her 20s. The family savings account at First Cedar, the one her father mentioned once a year at Christmas in exactly the same sentence. There's a little something set aside. Nobody had ever asked whose name was on it. Claire had always assumed the answer was Valerie, or the grandchildren, or nothing at all. Her eyes moved down the page and stopped. Beneficiary and sole intended recipient, Claire Elizabeth Whitmore. She read it 4 times. Then she sat down on the front step in her good coat with the flyer and the utility bill still in her lap and read the rest. The lawyer's language was flat and careful. Regular deposits, made monthly, beginning in the year of her divorce. Not large. $150, then $200, then $250 as his pension adjusted. Deposited on the 12th of every month for 5 years. Behind the legal pages was a second sheet, and this one was different. This one was typed on plain paper, and it had been signed at the bottom in ballpoint, in handwriting Claire knew from birthday cards that said nothing but Dad. He'd written about the year of the divorce, about driving past her rented duplex in Braddock on his way back from a job site and seeing her car in the lot with the hood up, and not stopping because he knew she wouldn't want him to see it. He wrote that he had gone home that night and told Lorraine that Claire needed help. And he wrote what Lorraine had said, that Claire was independent, that Claire had made her choices, that giving her money would only insult her because Claire was the strong one, and the strong one does not need anything. He wrote that he had believed his wife for about a week. Then he had gone down to First Cedar on Front Street on a Tuesday morning and opened an account and started putting money in it, and had not told anyone for 5 years. The balance was on the second page of the legal document. Claire found it. She looked at it. She checked the decimal point twice, the way you do. It was enough to close out the remaining balance on her mortgage. Not with room to spare. Almost exactly. Which meant her father, somewhere in the last year, had looked up what she still owed. And then there was the condition. The lawyer had put it in careful language, but it was simple enough underneath. The funds transferred to Claire alone, in her name alone, with a written acknowledgement that they were not to be pooled, shared, loaned, or committed to any other member of the family. If any part of it went into the family account, or to Valerie, or to Lorraine, the transfer would be void and the money would go back. Her father had built a wall around it. He knew. He had known the whole time. He had sat at every one of those dinners and watched her reach for every one of those checks. And he had known exactly what would happen to this money if he simply handed it to her. At the bottom of the page, in his own hand, one line, "Your mother believes keeping everyone together means keeping everyone dependent on one another. I believe family means making sure your children can stand on their own." Claire put the pages down on the step beside her. Then she put both hands over her face and cried. It came up out of her fast and ugly and shaking, and she let it because there was nobody on the street and her son was still at school for another 40 minutes. It was not the money. She understood that even while it was happening, she had been prepared to be broke. She'd been broke before. She had already decided, 3 nights ago in a dark kitchen, that she would rather be poor and clean than comfortable and owned. It was that somebody had chosen her. For 38 years, she had been the one who did the choosing, who showed up, who paid, who drove 4 hours, who covered, who forgave. And in a silent bank on Front Street, on the 12th of every month for 5 years, a quiet man in work boots had chosen her back. When it passed, Claire wiped her face with the back of her wrist and sat in the cold and looked down the street at nothing. Everything had shifted, not because she was suddenly comfortable, because she could finally see the shape of the trap she'd been in. She had believed, somewhere under everything, that if she stopped paying, she would lose them, and losing them would leave her with nothing. That was the fear that had signed every check. Not generosity. Fear. And the whole time, there had been a door. She had never been trapped. She had just been afraid to walk out. Harold called on Saturday morning. It was the first time in Claire's adult life that her father had called her without her mother in the room. "I'd like everybody at the house," he said. 2 o'clock. "You and the boy." "Dad, 2 o'clock," he said, and hung up, and Claire stood in her kitchen and laughed at the ceiling. The house on Sycamore looked the way it had looked her whole life. Same porch. Same iron railing painted white every 3rd summer. Same wind chime that had never once been in tune. Valerie's SUV was already in the driveway. Owen unbuckled and looked at the front door. "Do I have to?" Claire turned in her seat. She had promised herself, on the way over, that she was going to stop making choices for him that he was old enough to make. "No," she said. "You don't have to do anything in there. You can come in and sit with me, or you can stay out here with your notebook and my phone, and either one is completely fine." He thought about it. "I'll come in," he said, "but I'm sitting by Grandpa." Deal. Inside, the house smelled like coffee and the lemon spray Lorraine had used since 1994. Lorraine sat on the sofa with her back straight and her hands in her lap, dressed as though she were going somewhere. Valerie sat in the armchair by the window with her arms crossed. Dean had not come. Nobody said hello. Harold stood by the fireplace. He had not sat down. Owen crossed the room and sat on the ottoman beside his grandfather's chair, and Harold put a hand on the boy's shoulder and left it there. "All right," Harold said. Lorraine started. "Harold, I really think this would be better if I owe Claire an apology." The room stopped. Claire had known this man for 38 years and had never heard him interrupt his wife. Lorraine's chin came up. "Harold, no." His voice was not loud. It was the voice he used on a job site when the ground wasn't safe and there was no time to be polite about it. "I've stayed quiet a long time. It's cost this family more than any of you know." Valerie shifted in the armchair. Harold turned to Claire. "I watched you pay," he said. "Every dinner, every trip, that camp, the bracelet. I sat right there, and I watched you reach for it, and I knew why you were reaching, and I never once said stop. Claire said nothing. Her throat had closed. You reached because you thought that's what it took, her father said. To be one of us. And I let you keep thinking that, because it was easier than having a fight in my own house. Lorraine stood up. You're making this sound like we did something terrible to her. Harold looked at his wife of 35 years. It was worse than you'll admit, Lorraine. We fed her. We raised her. She had everything Valerie had. She did not, Harold said. And you know she did not. And so do I. And I let it happen for 30 years, which makes me worse than you, because I could see it and I still sat down. Silence. The wind chime knocked outside. Valerie found her voice first, and she aimed it where she always aimed it. So, this is what we're doing now. Claire's going to blow up the whole family over one dinner. Claire turned to her sister. You destroyed the relationship a long time before dinner, she said. The dinner just printed it on a card. Valerie's mouth tightened. You know, it's very convenient being the victim when you're the one with money. I don't have money, Val. I have a job and a mortgage and a kid. What I had was a habit of saying yes, and you both built a lifestyle on it. And now the habit's gone and you're calling it a betrayal. Fine. Valerie threw a hand up. Fine. So, what do you want? An apology? A public statement? What do you actually want out of this? And Claire answered without hesitating, because she had spent 3 nights deciding. Nothing. It landed harder than anything else she could have said. She watched it hit all 3 of them. What? Valerie said. Nothing. Claire looked at her mother. I don't want your money. I've never wanted your money. I want you to understand that. She held Lorraine's eyes and did not blink. And I don't want an apology, you don't mean. You'd give me one. You'd give me a beautiful one, and Diane Pruitt would hear about it by Thursday, and nothing underneath it would change. Lorraine's face was very still. Claire turned to her sister. And I don't want another invitation. Claire, Lorraine said. Her voice had gone thin. Sweetheart, I want peace, Claire said. That's all. Not a fight. Not revenge. Not a scene at Christmas. Peace. I'm going to raise my son somewhere that he never has to wonder where he ranks. She stood up. Owen. We're going. Owen got up. Harold's hand slid off his shoulder. At the door, Claire stopped and looked back at her father, and something passed between them that had no words attached to it, and did not need any. Dad, she said. Thank you. Harold nodded once, the way men of his generation nod, and turned to look out the window. Behind him, Lorraine was still standing in the middle of her own living room with her hands open at her sides. And for the first time in Claire's life, her mother looked like a woman who did not know what to do next. The consequences did not arrive all at once. That was the part people never understood about a decision like this. Nobody screamed. Nobody was disowned in a hallway. It came the way a tide goes out, so slowly that for the first month you could stand on the sand and tell yourself the water was still there. Claire stopped paying. Not dramatically. There was no announcement. She simply stopped doing the 20 small things she had done every month for 15 years. She removed her card from the family app in April. She stopped buying gifts for adults, though she still sent something to the children on their birthdays. A book, a model kit for Grant, who liked to build things. She stopped covering Lily's dance fees. She stopped answering the phone when a call started with, "Hey, so, quick question." The first reaction was exactly what she'd predicted. Selfish. That word came back to her through 3 different people in 6 weeks. Then, around the 2nd month, the tone shifted. Because the arithmetic started coming due. Valerie called in June. Not to apologize. Valerie was never going to apologize, and Claire had stopped needing her to. I'm not asking for anything, Valerie said. Did you know Mom's been putting the family dinners on her credit card? I didn't. Since March. Okay. A pause. You really did all of it, didn't you? Claire looked out at her yard. Yes, she said. I did. That was the whole conversation. Valerie hung up, and Claire noticed afterward that she felt nothing much at all. No triumph, no ache. Just the flatness that comes when a long argument finally stops being an argument and becomes a fact. Things got smaller after that. The Hawthorne dinners ended. Lorraine started hosting at the house again, and then hosting less. The big summer trip to the dunes became a weekend at a cabin an hour away. Valerie moved Lily to a cheaper dance program in Braddock, and told everyone the instructor was better. But the change that mattered most happened where none of the adults were watching. Claire heard about it in September from Harold, who had started calling her on Sunday afternoons. The kids had been at the house. Mason, 15 now and sullen in the way of 15-year-olds, had asked the question straight out at the dinner table. Why doesn't Owen come anymore? The adults had done what adults do. Something about schedules. Something about how busy Claire was with work. And Lily, 10 years old, arranging her silverware, not looking up, had said, because Grandma was mean to him. Harold said the table went quiet for a long time. He said Grant, who was 8 now, had put his fork down and said he remembered. The bread. The basket. Owen not having a plate. He said he thought Owen just wasn't hungry, Harold told her. He said he's been thinking about it for a year, and he doesn't think that's right. Claire stood in her kitchen with the phone against her ear and closed her eyes. Children keep a very clean set of books. They don't know how to write anything off. Everything the adults had spent a year explaining away, 3 kids had understood in one evening and had simply been waiting for someone to say out loud. Dad, she said. How's Mom? Harold was quiet a moment. Quiet, he said. She's quiet these days. Is that better or worse? I don't know yet, her father said. I'll tell you when I do. A year went by, and it went faster than Claire expected. She paid off the mortgage in November, at a desk at First Cedar, and then walked out to her car and sat there for 10 minutes without turning the key. 38 years old, and she owned something outright for the first time in her life. In February, she sold the house. Not because she had to, because she wanted to, because there was a place on the north side of the lake, a small gray house with a screened porch and a maple in the yard, and it cost less than what her old house sold for, and it had a bedroom at the back with a window that faced east. Owen picked that room in about 4 seconds. They painted it together over a weekend, and Claire built him a desk under the window from a kit that took 6 hours instead of the promised 2. He put his drawings up on the wall with blue tape, dozens of them now, cars and engines and one careful study of the maple outside, and rearranged them roughly every 2 weeks. He was 12 and taller. He joined an after-school club where a retired mechanic taught 6 kids how an engine worked, and he came home on Thursdays smelling faintly of oil and talking so fast Claire had to ask him to back up. He stopped asking why his grandparents treated him differently. That was the thing Claire noticed most, and it took her a long time to name it. It wasn't that he'd gotten over anything. It was that the question had stopped being interesting to him. He had enough. When a boy has enough, he stops counting. They saw Harold about once a month. Sometimes he sat on the porch and let Owen explain carburetors to him. Sometimes he took the boy fishing at the shallow end where nobody caught anything. He never brought Lorraine. Claire never asked him to. On a Saturday in May, Claire drove them out to the Hawthorne Lodge. She'd been thinking about it for months, and she'd been honest with herself about why. Part of it was for Owen. Part of it was for her. She was not going to pretend otherwise. The road was the same. The pines were the same. The lake came up silver through the trees, and the copper lanterns were burning even at 4 in the afternoon. They got a table by the water. Not the long one. A small one. For 2. Right at the glass. The hostess gave Owen a menu, and he opened it, and Claire watched his eyes go down the page. He stopped at the same line she'd once turned around on a tablecloth. Mom. He looked up. Can I get steak? Claire folded her hands on the table. You can get whatever you want. He grinned then, the wide-open one, the one that showed the tooth that had come in crooked and that they were going to deal with next year. Even the big one. Even the big one. The waiter who came over was a woman in her 50s, and she took the order without any expression on her face at all, and Claire was grateful for that. The steak came out on a hot plate. It was enormous, exactly as she remembered, crusted dark, sitting in butter, a sprig of something green across the top. Owen looked at it for a second with real ceremony before he touched it. Then he cut a piece and ate it, and closed his eyes and said, Okay, that's worth it. They ate. Outside, a boat went by slowly and left a long V on the water. The fire popped in the stone hearth behind them, the same as it had. Halfway through, Owen put his fork down. You remember that dinner? Claire looked at him. He was asking carefully, the way you test a step. Yes, she said. I thought Grandma didn't like me. He turned his water glass. For a long time, actually. Like, I thought maybe I did something when I was little that I couldn't remember. Claire reached across the table and put her hand over his. I know, she said. I know you did. I don't think that anymore. Good. I think he stopped and worked on it, and Claire let him. I think she liked having somebody to be nicer to, and it wasn't about me at all. Claire looked at her son for a long moment. 12 years old. That's exactly it, she said. He nodded, satisfied, and picked his fork back up. I'm glad we left, he said. So am I. The text came that evening, while Claire was standing on the screen porch watching the light go off the water. Emma, I miss you. Can we talk? Claire read it. The porch boards were cool under her bare feet. Somewhere out on the lake, a loon called and then stopped. Inside, she could hear Owen at his desk, the scrape of a chair leg and the small percussion of a pencil box being emptied. A year ago, she would have called immediately. Not even a year. 6 months ago, she would have read that message and felt the whole apparatus start up inside her. The hope, the excuse-making, the immediate frantic search for a version of events in which her mother had finally understood. She would have called, and Lorraine would have said something warm for 4 minutes and something sharp in the 5th, and Claire would have gone to bed hollow and told herself it was progress. She stood there and waited to feel the pull. It came. She would not have believed it if it hadn't. That hook had been in her for 38 years, and it did not come out clean. But it came smaller than it used to, and she noticed that she was able to hold it and look at it without doing anything about it. The way you can hold a cola moment if you know exactly how long you have. I miss you. Not I was wrong. Not I hurt him. Not I'm proud of you. I miss you, which was a sentence about Lorraine. Claire turned the phone face down on the porch rail. The screen door opened behind her. Grandma? Owen said. He had a pencil behind his ear, which was new, and which he had definitely copied from the retired mechanic. Yes. Are you going to answer? Claire thought about it properly, because he deserved a properly thought answer. She thought about the birthdays and the sweater with the clearance sticker in the collar. About the bracelet and the summer camps and the $460 in a parking lot in Braddock. About 15 years of being told she was the strong one by people who only ever said it when they wanted something. She thought about a room full of people and 4 cream cards and a boy in a shirt he'd buttoned himself, looking at a breadbasket and doing math. She thought about her father, on the 12th of every month, in a bank on Front Street. No, she said. Owen nodded. He didn't ask why. He never had, not once in the whole year. Okay, he said. Can I use the good pencils? They're your pencils. Yeah, but you said they were for, use the good pencils, Owen. He went back inside. The screen door clapped shut, and Claire heard him settle in. She stayed out on the porch until the last of the color went out of the sky. She was not angry. That was the part her family had never understood, and probably never would. Lorraine would tell people that Claire had cut them off out of spite. Valerie would tell people that Claire had money now and got proud. It would become a story that got shorter every time it was told, until eventually it was 1 sentence long and had nothing in it that had actually happened. Let them, because anger would have meant she was still in it. Anger was just love with nowhere to go, and Claire had found somewhere for hers to go. She had learned one thing that year, and it had cost her more than the money. Forgiveness was not an obligation. People said the opposite so often that it sounded like a law. Family is family. You only get one mother. Life is short. All of it designed, when you looked at it plainly, to make sure the person who was hurt did the work of repairing what somebody else broke. Some relationships needed another chance. Some of them needed an ending. A clean one, without shouting, with the door closed and the lights turned off behind it. Claire picked up her phone. She did not open the message. She put it in her pocket. For 38 years, she had been trying to earn a seat at her family's table. She had paid for the food on it, and the room around it, and the chairs, and she had still sat at the end, watching a child count cards. She had finally understood the thing she should have seen at 25. She didn't need their table. She had built her own, and at her table, for the rest of his life, her son would never have to wonder whether he belonged.